Well, in the words of Jaun Elia Sahib, I was hearing one of his poems today that बस फाइलों का बोझ उठाया करें जनाब, मिसरा ये जॉन का है, इसे मत उठाइए. That learn the patterns of poetry, that's what you ought to do. Don't try to rip off this stuff of Jaun Elia. That's a legend, people, a legend. There's a line of his that, you see, the thing I really like about this poet, let me share some, whilst some people are tuning in, let me talk a bit about this legend to you, why I kind of take a liking to him. You see, Jaun Elia has a kind of, he's a poet from the Indian subcontinent. He spells his name not John, but Jaun, Jaun, like that. But I think it may be equivalent to the English John, because I'm assuming he came from a Christian kind of background. Although later on in life, I'm pretty sure he was either agnostic or atheist later on in his life. But he comes from a place, Amroha, in India. And then he migrates to Karachi, Pakistan. And then he migrates to Dubai, UAE. And then he kind of floats in between. And he passes his life in this state of, I don't know, like a wanderer, I guess. But he touches up on certain elements within his poetry that are just kind of brutal truths that normal poets don't dare touch up on. They don't dare. You see, for poets, quite often, they paint an amazing picture. So they may be describing something or somebody very beautiful, maybe kind of describing a woman or I don't know, some scenic kind of thing, and they may give illustrious words, and that's quite common for poets. They may be speaking of, I don't know, epics or things like this, but with Jaun, there's a whole, there's a very kind of, there's a reality that's all too real and a bit too dark sometimes, and almost a very self-destructive nature about him that resonates with a lot of his fans. And a lot of people who are really, they infatuated by him. This kind of loneliness, I guess, that he has that echoes from his words. So the way he says things like, he'll have, you know, lines like, बस एक ही फन सीखा है हमने, जिसे मिलिए उसे खफा कीजिए, that I've only really mastered one skill, and that is whosoever you meet, leave them upset or disheartened. Things like this is whole kind of, it's very, it has a tragedy, but which is so real in the real world. Like, he has in his line, the way he expresses somebody who, for example, loves him, and he says, and they want a state of companionship. So he has a line, a poem, where he says, "Ehde rafaqat theek hai lekin mujhko aisa lagta hai." That companionship is fine, like I have no problem. But he says, but it appears to me as such, tum to mere saath rahogi, main tanha reh jaunga. That he says that, admittedly, you will get to be with me, but I will still remain alone. There is just a brutal reality sometimes to his words that are so, wow, they're epic. And he has this line in which he really brings home a sense of tragedy. I'll share this with you. He says that, बात तेरे जाने जा, दिल में रहा अजब समा, याद रही तेरी यहाँ, फिर तेरी याद भी गई. You know, I laugh at it, but it's so tragic. He's saying in this poem that after you'd left, like you'd gone for good, he says that there was a strange atmosphere within my heart. that this, like in my heart, this is where your memories resided. That this is where they lived, in my heart. And then eventually they too left. And you see, that is so interesting that seldom will you see a poet touch up on things like this, that the true tragedy wasn't even the loss, but it was the state of indifference. It was the state that even the sad memories will dissipate and disappear. And that was the true sense of loss. Amazing, very profound. There's that line actually reminds me of there's a similar poem by Abu Layth, the Arab poet, who's often just known for his very ascetic, very hermit kind of lifestyle. It gets a bit boring sometimes, but he has a line like that where he says, سيعرض عن ذكري وتنسى مودتي ويحدث بعدي للخليل خليل. That he says eventually even let alone my love, like he says, people will move away from it, but even my memories will be forgotten. And those to whom I was beloved, somebody else will be beloved to them. But in these words he captures a tragedy that is so real. Anyway, with these words, let's commence, people, let's commence. Right. Omar Khayyam, if you're looking for tragedy, Allah, I'll check out Omar Khayyam. But I find some words in certain people like Jaun Elia and people like this very, just so gripping. I must say, I do find them very incredibly gripping. But nevertheless, let's do you